Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Design Review Board public meeting of August 10th, 2017 is called to order. Please refrain from talking amongst yourselves and please turn off or put on vibrate all cell phones at this time. If you need to talk, please leave the meeting room. Anyone who wishes to speak, including applicants, on any of the applications to be reviewed today are asked to completely fill out one of the speaker cards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff. You will be asked to speak by the board when your case is called. Anyone who wishes to be re-noticed about a case in the event of a return for redesign must completely fill out one of the postcards provided at the table by the front door and submit it to staff to receive notice of subsequent hearings. Current Design Review Board agendas are available on our website at www.glendaleca.gov. A handout describing the procedures of the meeting, possible board decisions, and Design Review Board appeals is available from staff. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian?
Yes.
Board Member Charchian?
Here.
Board Member Malikian?
Present.
And Board Member Simonian is absent. The report regarding posting of the agenda. This agenda was posted on the bulletin board outside City Hall at or before 5 p.m. on August 2nd, 2017. Next item is oral communications. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. I have no oral communication cards.
Neither do I.
And none were submitted, which brings us to the review calendar and staff announcements. There is one brief staff announcement dealing with a particular project that was supposed to be continued to today's date involving a project at 1329, again that's 1329 Virginia Avenue. That case is being further continued to August 24th, so in 2 weeks, and it will be re-noticed. That said, we have two projects on this evening's agenda. I'm not sure if if I should turn the meeting over to Chairman Malikian, who will then be turning it back over to me to give the staff presentation,
Let's go ahead
or
and
not.
get started. So
Okay.
I don't think we have enough time today to go over everything. So.
All right. The first case on this evening's agenda is a multifamily residential project proposed at 348 to 350 Salem Street. The applicant is Andre Hagaverdian, and this particular project, the project involves the demolition of the existing residential structures. Again, this is for 348 Salem Street, which is a one residential unit constructed in 1911, and the demolition of 350 Salem, which consists of 5 residential units developed over the course of 35 years from 1910 to 1945. Following the demolition, there's the proposal to construct a new 3-story, 12-unit multifamily residential development on the approximately 14,000 square foot lot zoned R12, 1250, which is a high-density residential zone, and with a total of 28 parking spaces in a one-level subterranean garage. I will quickly go to the board just to give a brief overview and come back to the desk. You'll note here, this is the topographical survey for the property, the existing units at 348 and 350, totaling a project site for approximately 14,000 square feet. Based on the R1250 zoning designations, they would be permitted to develop 11 units. However, because of the lot width being greater than 90 feet, they are allowed to then propose a density of 1 unit for every 1,000 square feet. And in response to that, they do need to provide additional publicly accessible open space at the front. So they are proposing 12 units, which is within the allowable density, and they are providing additional open space, which is a greater front setback along Salem Street as required by code. The existing structures The proposed demolition, that is, of the existing structures was reviewed, and there was a historical assessment that was prepared and presented as part of the initial study. And again, because the project is over, is proposed at 12 units, there was an initial study done, environmental review, taking a look at all the various environmental impacts that could possibly be looked at, and there was a negative declaration prepared that was submitted as part of your packet. But the demolition of the structures was found not to be a significant impact, and as such, there's a negative declaration proposed. Going back to the site plan, the building itself, it has one level of subterranean garage on top. Then you have a podium structure. The building footprint shows essentially one elongated building on each half of the lot with a central courtyard in the middle and the additional open space at the front street elevation. In this case, this proposed site plan is very consistent with a lot of the multifamily residential projects being proposed along Salem Street. There is additional common open space that's at the rear for use by the residents. And noted on the roof plan, they have a significant square footage, almost 1,000 square feet plus of roof patio area to be used as common open space as well. In regards to the actual mass and scale, the project complies with the height standards for multifamily residential. It is 3 stories. It does feature step backs and tiering sections as noticed on the elevation drawings here below. There's also a different use of materials on certain elements. You'll notice that there is a very decorative front facade that basically screens the elevator and the stairwell at the front. This then architectural piece is noted off with additional fenestration patterns of glazing, horizontal and vertical, and changes in the material and changes in the plane. So with that breakdown of the elevations, the entire building mass does not appear as large. Last but not least, it's a contemporary design. It fits within the neighborhood itself because this neighborhood along Salem Street is rather changing. You'll note that most of the latest construction is contemporary, clean lines, clean finishes, stucco materials, you'll notice grays, tans, and whites. So the overall appearance is this crisp, streamlined type of architectural style. The project complies with all of the zoning standards for the R1250 zone. That gives a brief overview of the staff presentation, or the staff report obviously went into much greater detail, but I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
I have a couple of quick questions. It looks like there's a couple of design options that are being floated, which is kind of a strange.
Well, and I'm going to allow the architect to speak to that because there was some discussion with regards to it's a modular patterned block that is actually transparent. So it's not a solid block. And there was a little bit of staff discussion. Well, is this too angular or is this too whimsical? So the architect actually submitted two alternatives. One is obviously more of a circular bubble pattern for the block, and the other one's a much more regulated, for lack of a better word, stylized, and yes, exactly.
Straight edges. And then on the public, you said that there's a public space requirement that gives them an extra unit in the front. Is that public to the building or public to the public? It's
more, and that's a good question. It's not really public to the public. It's additional common open space, okay, so that the entire building has to be set back even further. So as opposed to having greater density pushed out to the front of the street, the density is somewhat held back from the street, sort of okay, giving more relief at the street edge, gotcha, that being landscaped.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Condition number 4, can you explain a little bit about that? It's a little confusing.
Okay. Okay, so yes, going back Basically, staff is recommending approval with conditions, the 5 conditions, and the 4th condition being to clarify the fence wall elements above the subterranean garage podium along the interior property lines identified on section drawing sheet A 4.0, which is in this case. So to comply with the zoning code, the combined height of the garage and any solid wall or solid fence atop the garage in the setback area must not exceed 6.5 feet adjacent to the ground level design. So any portion, so when you're looking at the adjacent grade, okay, the neighbor on the fence wall above the podium on the garage side, if it's above a certain height, it has to be more transparent and more open. So it can't be just a solid wall, which basically emphasizes like a mass next to the adjacent
But
neighbor.
is there a section that it does that?
So,
Because it seems like everything is below grade.
well,
Or
in this
under.
case, we're just stating this as a prelude for them to submit into plan check. Just as note, your fence wall has to be transparent on the upper.
So in other words, if there's further engineering that's done down the road to make sure that this is buildable, we don't want to see a fence wall that's larger than 6.5 feet.
6.5 feet, correct. And well, actually, if it is 6.5 feet, then
6.5 feet is from the grade, adjacent grade to the top of whatever railing, or
Correct.
whatever fence, and whatever they have.
correct.
So anything above that, if they need to have it, let's say,
It
if
has
they
to
have
be.
like a 3-foot retaining wall for the garage, and then they're putting another 4-foot
Has to be open at that point.
railing or something, then
Correct.
that extra.
That
Okay.
that has to be a wrought iron fence or something that's compatible but open, as opposed to a solid block wall.
All right.
And just to go over the other conditions where, then this would be, the first condition being to reevaluate the colors and treatment of this rear facade. And again, this would be the rear facing the neighbors directly to the back to make it more consistent with the other 3 elevations. The second would be to provide gates or extend the landscaping planters to provide separation between the private patios and the common walkways to make that more meaningful separation between the two. The third was to submit the design of the front doors to the units and the paving material for the front walkway and driveway for staff review and approval prior to plan check. The fourth condition being the walls along the interior above the subterranean garage, which we just discussed. And the fifth being to enlarge the landscape planters that call for 24-inch box trees along the interior property lines vertically and horizontally, because they do need to have greater depth, whether it be 30 or 36 inches as opposed to 24.
William,
Yes.
may I ask?
Yes.
The elevation colors that you were talking about, can you elaborate a little more on that? I understand that probably it's not as detailed as the front, but when you're talking colors, isn't it like
Well,
they're using the same colors?
They're proposing, unlike here where you had these elements that break up the facade as opposed to one longer, white facade, here there's just a solitary, very narrow vertical element here on the ends.
So it's not the color, it's more of a use of the material.
Whether it's the material, whether it's color, I'm going to allow the architect to sort of use his expertise and creativity, but to sort of mix it up a little bit more as opposed to having a solid white wall along the rear.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
That explains it.
Okay, we have 2 cards. The applicant, Andre, if you want to.
I'm
Well,
sorry, you're going to have to speak into the microphone and
If you don't
introduce
have
yourself.
anything, so I'll just kind of pass my, then Jean-Pierre.
So if you don't mind stating your name and for the record, please,
Good evening, Jean-Pierre Valadian, 408, address 2.
if you like.
It's okay. Jean-Pierre Valadian. We're the designer of the building, and thank you. I went over the conditions. I have no problem with the conditions. We'll clarify it further during the plan check process. And then as I think the As regard of the rear elevation, we'll work it out. I could break the bottom first floor, make a darker shade to give it a little more weight to the building. I mean, we could.
You have these
I'm
bump
open.
outs. So those bump outs, you can wrap that stone around it, and it just gives you what you're looking for. I think this is already a natural
Yeah.
way of addressing it the same way you
That will do.
Yeah, I could take care of that. That's no problem.
Yeah.
Let's take
I will do that, Ilya, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Beside that, regarding the modular art for option A and B, was a funny thing because everyone liked the style at the meetings. So we said, you know what, let's put the two options. I'm okay with either option.
Which one do you like?
I like. I mean, I'm using I like the circular one more. Again, I'm open for your advice and opinion. Respect your judgments too. I'm not married to it. If by democratic vote, if you guys like the circle, I'll go with the circle. Otherwise, we'll go with the other one. I have no issue with it. Either way, it will look nice. That's about it. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of just really quick ones. You have 28 parking spots in this project. I'm assuming that
28,
28, correct?
28.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that you're putting in 2 handicap, and are you doing any? Is the code requiring you to do any electrical vehicle stuff like
Yeah,
that?
we've been facing those on the other buildings. Yeah, this building has been
It's actually
taken care of.
marked here.
We
EVS.
revised it.
Oh, it is.
There's an EVS.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, all
That's
that
good to
EV and all that recent requirements.
Yeah, that's
This
good.
project is being taken care of.
Good, good.
covered.
'Cause it's good to see, as a public comment, it's good to see a project that's coming and it's actually, providing sufficient parking for the residents and for some,
Plus the
some newer vehicles, and also taking, cars off the street, which is always a concern on some of these smaller streets in Glendale. So it's good to see that. Sorry, did you have a comment?
And also, the handicap parking is on top of the minimum requirement, so it's not combined within the requirement.
Yeah, I saw that you had.
Yeah, we've been doing that lately
Yeah, it's good.
to
it's good.
avoid problems.
It's good because of the fact that, yeah, like you said, it creates issues if there's multiple people that are handicapped in a building, handicap spaces.
And then when they're writing all the maps and all that, dividing the parkings for each unit, it's been creating problems. Who gets that stall, the handicap? So I think we've been trying to add that additional handicap separately.
Which brings me to my other question, which is this designed for sale as a condo, or
You know,
designed
how it
as-
is. They
designed
want to
either
keep
way.
it, and then they change their mind. It's, I think Andre could.
I'm sorry, we can't.
I don't
we can't
think
hear
at
you.
this
We
point
can't
it's
have them.
apartment,
okay, at this point it's a part? Okay, the design could lend to both.
but it is designed for as a condo. We have the party walls and everything. It's designed as it was being for subdivision.
Permit is being
There's a-
permitted for apartment, but in case in the
in
future
case they want to
decide
apply for it, they could
Sure,
easily.
no, I
do it.
understand. And so the reason I bring that up is, there's a shortage of housing in Glendale, as you know, sellable housing. So
Correct.
would always encourage having more sellable housing if possible. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We don't have any more cards. I will close the public session.
I'll go. I think staff report addressed most of the issues, and it's a straightforward project. Clean design, I like the design, clean, contemporary. I agree with Mr. Maliki on the rear elevation. You probably need to wrap those just to break up the masses. Other than that, I agree with all the staff conditions, and in terms of options A and options B, myself, I like the circular one because I think everything about this building is contemporary and has that straight line look. I think having something circular, it does that. It has that. It kicks that balance. But other than that, I think I'm in support. Good project.
Thank you. Churchill?
I'm going to join those comments. I think it's well designed at each level of the project, from the subterranean parking where it has a very good layout, provides additional parking, and also the overall design is using some quality materials. I'm not going to make a vote as to A or B on the modular panels. I'll leave that up to you guys. I think they're both acceptable for the project, and so I would be in support.
I as well agree. I think it's a very nice project. It's rare to see development. If you're allowed to do more units, and you come in with the lesser units, so which is encouraged, and therefore it allows more open space. I do agree the circular pattern is a better choice rather than the rectilinear. Other than that, I want to go over the negative mitigated. So, I mean, if you guys had a chance to look at that.
I had no concerns.
Okay.
Yeah, everything was less than significant.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
So, if we're going to agree on the conditions as staff, and if we can make an...
I'll make a motion to adopt the negative, final negative declaration.
I'll second that.
I have a motion to adopt the final negative declaration, a motion made by Board Member Charchian and seconded by Board Member Benlian. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian?
Yes.
Board Member Charchian?
Yes.
Chairman Malikian?
Yes.
The motion passes to adopt the final negative declaration, and then that would go to the Design Review Board. Whether or not you would approve with conditions, with staff's conditions, and essentially alternative B, which is the circular.
I'll make a motion.
Before we, Mr. Billion, before we do that, there's the additional condition that the chairman brought up as to, and was seconded, I believe, by Mr. Billion's comment about changing the on-grade color scheme by wrapping around the.
No.
the
Oh, no, the rear.
addressing the wraparound with the stone.
The rear, for condition number, what was it?
4.
So
No, it wasn't the 4.
condition number 1 is to reevaluate the colors and treatment of the rear southerly facades.
So
to
condition
better-
number 1, I think the suggestion was to incorporate some of the stone of the two sections. I don't know how you would word this. And the
So maybe
bump outs in the back area would be wrapped with stone to address number 1. That would be
would that be such as incorporating the
such
stone?
as incorporating.
Okay, so it would still
So it would
remain
be
a
up to them which direction, but
Okay.
that's what I was.
All right. With that modification, are there any other conditions that you would like to add?
no.
Okay. So with that said, is there a motion to approve with conditions?
I'll make the motion. Motion to approve with conditions.
I'll second.
and-
Oh, sorry.
Okay. And in terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian,
Yes.
Board Member Charchian,
Yes.
Chairman Malikian.
Yes.
The motion passes to approve with such conditions.
Okay, this one.
Okay. The next item on tonight's agenda is a new single-family residential project.
Before
On
we
Hills-
go on,
yes.
do I need to sign anything for the environmental? Is there a...
Should be a negative declaration here.
I will get that to you after the meeting.
Okay.
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 Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for that reminder.
Maybe there's one here, so let me just check. Okay, sorry to cut you off.
No, and
No,
that's,
just
thank you
the
for the
minutes.
reminder, and it will be after the meeting, so
Okay.
for the signature, the resolution, correct.
Okay.
Okay. So again, as noted, this is a single-family residential project located on a vacant hillside lot addressed as 659 through 669 Atkins Drive. This project was also continued from the July 27th meeting, which was canceled due to the lack of quorum. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 2-story, just under 3,000 square foot single-family residence with an attached 2-car garage on a vacant 12,450 square foot hillside lot zoned R1R, floor area District 1. The project site itself has an average current slope of 63%. In addition to the new single-family residential residence, that is, the two-car garage and driveway, there are new retaining walls proposed for the driveway and at the rear of the project site, and grading of approximately 1,700 cubic yards. I should correct that. 1,700 cubic yards of cut and 8 cubic yards of fill for a net total of 1,719 cubic yards. The subject property is composed of 2 lots. The site is wider than it is deep. It has approximately 104 linear feet of frontage along Atkins Drive and is approximately 65 feet deep on the southerly property line, and 120 feet deep on the northerly property line. It slopes up from the street in the westerly direction towards the rear of the lot, so it has an upslope. And again, as noted, the average current slope was just around 63%. The site contains a total of 16 trees, 9 of which are protected coast live oaks, and 1 is a protected scrub oak. The Urban Forestry Division staff reviewed the submitted tree report, and that tree report was included as part of your staff report. And the division approved the removal of 1 of the protected coast live oaks, and that would be coast live oak number 14, which is located on the northerly side. I'm going to come right up to. If I change the So down here you have the survey plan as showing also the trees on site, and you'll note that tree number 14 is the one that is being proposed. So if you're looking at Atkins Drive on this particular site plan, it would be a coast live oak that's located along this particular property line, okay, that is being proposed for removal. All the other trees on site and the remaining 8 oak trees and scrub oak are going to remain in place and be protected and preserved with mitigation measures. The project site, in terms of a site plan, because of the unique shape of the lot topography, and the existing oaks, those 3 factors sort of played into the actual resulting site plan, which essentially is a long, windy driveway that curves up along parallel to the street front property line, and then goes into a 2-car garage. I guess it's not really evident here. It goes into a 2-car garage that's located at the ground floor level of the house, and then you'll have the 2 levels of residential living space atop this particular building pad that's constructed essentially topping off the sloped front elevation. So you'll notice if you went out to the site, there's a rather steep slope, so they are proposing to do grading at that location, put in the driveway, put in the retaining walls for the driveway, and then put in the building pad that somewhat conforms to the topography or to the topo lines of the site itself. So they are cutting off that front slope. They are proposing 15-foot high retaining walls per code at the rear. Those retaining walls are 15 feet back, and this is a building code requirement. So this is working hand in hand, building code and in terms of the zoning code. So they have to have a retaining wall that's a minimum 15 feet from the building wall. And as noted, the second floor is actually constructed into the hillside. So there are no openings on the ground floor. There are no openings at the rear. So it's essentially the second floor, and it's noted here, that actually has the rear retaining walls and the patio area to the rear. There were discussions with the applicant in regards to the particulars of this site. Can you possibly have a driveway? Can you possibly have a garage that fronts Atkins, that drives straight in, and that would be more similar to the other surrounding homes in the neighborhood, which essentially were built longer, under different codes, majority of which are basically anywhere in the 1940s to the 1960s, some into the 1980s, which basically had that straight in shot from Atkins Drive with a 2-car garage and a shorter driveway. And you'll notice if you took a look around, most of those driveways now are legal non-conforming. They don't have the required depth. They don't have the required setback of today's code, which in this case, in an R1R zone, is a 15-foot setback for the building itself and an 18-foot setback for the driveway. So in discussions, it seemed like it would be very difficult, and in this case, it would require multiple variances if they were to go ahead and to essentially grade into the lot, have the driveway on the same level as the street, because you would be building retaining walls going in that would exceed our code. So because you'd be providing 18-foot deep driveway and then a house on top. So without variances, that type of proposal would not be able to move forward. So in this case,
I don't understand the variance for what? I mean, it's been done before. So what is the variance for?
the variance.
It's not for the 18-foot driveway.
Well, in this case, if they wanted if they were to propose a straight and shot driveway with straight and shot, or I should say the 2-car garage oriented towards Atkins Street,
Right.
at street level, you would either have to have a reduced setback and driveway length, which they'd have to go through variances, or if they were to cut greater into the hillside to provide that 15-foot setback and that 18-foot driveway length, you would have retaining walls on the side that exceed code. So instead, the applicant came forward with a code compliant project. So in this respect, staff was somewhat, could see the hardship that this created, because in one way, you're proposing a project that doesn't comply with code and would need variances, or do you want a code compliant project, and which is better, which is worse in terms of massing?
The retaining walls reduces the height, so I'm not sure. I mean, you can have a 5-foot retaining wall, 7 foot in the front.
You would have it much greater then because of the
Right,
existing.
but then you would step that back and you have another consecutive retaining wall, and you create that. I'm not sure.
You're limited to 5-foot retaining walls in the front alone.
Parallel 7, perpendicular
5, right.
Right.
And based on the slope right here, because of the grade differential,
Way more than
it
that.
would be probably double that, if not more so. And that's the reason why. Yes.
I have some questions.
Yes.
Whatever. So the first floor plan, and I know we were dealing with a revision, but the first floor plan shows the garage at I'd say about 30-degree angle off, and then the cutout that we have on A2, A1, A3 shows a different kind of, not 201, but A1, A001, A002 shows a different layout for the property. How does that match up? I'm not seeing that.
Yeah, those are good questions. Those are coming up.
Okay, so essentially, what you're seeing here would be the outline of the second floor, and then underneath here on the dash line, this is the garage right here.
Okay.
They cut the plan just.
They cut the plan, so, correct. So this would basically be the outline of the first floor that's built into the hillside, and above, the second floor is then,
Yeah, so they create this mast that hangs
I understand.
on the second floor, right?
that overhangs.
Yeah, there's this huge overhang then.
According to their cross-sections that they've submitted, they're showing the majority of the home as being, you mean the second floor, as being pushed back and
So-
not pushed forward into the street.
So if you're here, and you're standing here, the second floor is above your head,
Correct.
and so this is all overhang, correct?
And this would be basically this would be a balcony right here and the deck right here.
Yeah.
And in fact, this particular portion right here is actually the roof line. So it's not so much
Well,
the
it's-
second
it's
floor.
that bump out.
It's this roof line that projects over.
Yes, it's that roof.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's that shape, that elbow shape that's above the front entryway. So this entry elbow right here is this portion that projects over the front.
So I'm just trying to understand how massive that's going to look.
Again, those were some of the concerns because as noted, because the staff report was very detailed in regards to the hillside design guidelines and the project proposal. In terms of a mass and scale, staff, again, when you analyzed the neighborhood context, this was larger than the average size of the home in the neighborhood within 300 feet. It wasn't, but it is within the range of existing homes within the neighborhood. But because of the overall width of the site and the house
and the 62%
and the
slope.
62% slope, there was a little bit of concern with regards to the mass and scale because we had worked with the architect or with the applicant. And this is actually a number of revisions after the fact because this project started in February of this year, so a number of months ago. They have been working towards trying to modify the design to reflect the topography as required in the hillside design guidelines because the hillside design guidelines basically state you need to follow the topography of the slope. You need to step the project back in regards to the upslope or downslope condition. They have made revisions to do so. These were the drawings that were submitted for the design review. Before you have a revised project that was submitted just before, like a day or so before the actual design review board hearing. And this revised project that you have on the dais actually was designed to address staff conditions that were in the staff report. And these were the concerns that the elongated mass might be, sort of accentuates the horizontality and accentuates the mass across the lot. In terms of, and I don't want to continue on, I'm not sure if we want to go down point by point what mass and scale, but in terms of the actual design, staff had conditions which, decrease the overall, the size and width, perhaps shrink it because it is a 3,000 square foot house. They are unfortunately faced with the fact that it's a very blunt lot. It's not very deep. So their house itself ranges between 15 and 20 feet in depth. It's not a very deep house. So unfortunately, they're limited by the slope, in terms of how, the width of, or not the width, but, the length or the depth of their house. But could you possibly decrease the overall width to make it more, can you, but maintain the fenestration? Staff actually felt, we supported the contemporary design and the look of it. They have fenestration patterns, there's a lot of glass, there's a lot of horizontality that's emphasized over the vertical, except for some sections such as these vertical oriented retaining walls at the driveway, which staff was definitely not supportive of because this vertical pattern accentuates the horizontality already that staff had a little bit of heartburn in regards to the amount of grading, the amount of retaining walls on that driveway to create this buildable pad, but this just accentuated it. So, they came back and they've revised a plan. But overall, with the clean lines, with the contemporary look, it sort of breaks down the mass and whatnot, but there's still room for improvement in terms of can you shrink the width? That was one of the conditions. There was a proposal to introduce a change in the parapet height and level to soften the horizontality, because right now, as you'll notice here, this is a cross section. So the neighbor somewhat to the south is a little higher, The neighbor somewhat to the north is a little lower, so they sort of bring to that across, but then their roof line completely is flat. So there was a recommendation, perhaps because of the floor plates, at the ground floor being as high as they are, could they have sort of staggered and softened the horizontality within the actual structure itself to sort of maybe cut the roof line, bring it down, to sort of follow the topography a little bit more. They came back and, again, in the revised project that you have on the dais, I'm going to let the architect and the applicant speak to that, because these were the changes that they made in response to staff's recommendations in the staff report. But just to briefly continue on, the third condition would be to offset the second floor from the first floor at the central portion at the front entry to better reflect the slope condition and conform with the hillside design lines. Because again, in this project, this was all in one plane, and we had been talking about it that the actual project really needs to stagger and step with the topography. The fourth was to redesign the vertically oriented retaining walls at the front. Either a horizontal poured concrete finish or a burnished block should be proposed. The fifth was to revise the landscape plan to add additional landscaping, which would be trees, taller shrubs, and climbing vines at the bottom and front of the retaining walls. And this is evident here, where in the original proposal, you had the vertical retaining walls, you had the grading that was done. And mind you, unfortunately, because of the R1R standards, you cannot fill much when it comes to the front setback. So unfortunately, code does not allow you to backfill this buffer area. We can somewhat change it, they're gonna have to modify it, but you can't artificially then come back and fill that section. So they're working with what they have. Staff felt it really needs to be augmented based on, this is a perspective drawing, this is a nice, beautiful picture, but when you look at the actual landscape plans themselves, it doesn't correlate with the perspective drawings.
Has this been changed in front? Have you seen the previous design that had the step retaining walls in the front?
No.
Their
What did you mean
Soul's
by
report has a completely different design.
This was not, yeah.
Okay.
So the soils report was based on the actual slope analysis, what the bedrock, the foundation, whatnot. No, we have not worked at all with the proposal that's in the soils report. So I'm going to let the architect speak to that. So, and then the last was to clarify the proposed grass area at the rear patio. And again, this is just their foundation plans, and what we're seeing here is essentially, it's a solid structural foundation across, whereas some of their plans are showing grass and landscaping along the rear deck, which would not meet what is being shown on their cross sections. So with that said, based on all these items, staff at this point in time is proposing these conditions with a return for redesign recommendation. Now, it's up to the board to feel. You can take a look and see, is it compatible, is it not compatible? And you can obviously...
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple of
Yes.
questions. Is there height, excuse me, is there a height requirement that they're at, or is there
Yes.
a possibility of going to third story?
Well, they are at this point in time meeting the height requirement for R1R for a two-story structure. So they could, if they wanted to, and this would be a little bit more difficult though, because this is where the whole grading and not grading and whatnot. When you have a parallelogram in an R1R zone, if within that parallelogram, so if they were to draw a four-sided parallel, or not parallelogram, four-sided polygon, for lack of a, within that polygon, if it's more than 40% slope, they would be allowed a three-story structure. But they would still be within that height limit. So right now, they're at the height limit.
Gotcha.
So whether you have a two-story or a three-story structure, that would be the difference. Right now, they're at the maximum height. And this is because they have to include the portion of the retaining wall that's used for the driveway, because it's part of the foundation for the house above. Their height is taken from this point where the driveway is, where the retaining wall is, to the very top of the flat roof.
Gotcha. And speaking of that driveway, there's this rendering this revised rendering that has grass or some sort of vegetation. I shouldn't say grass, some sort of vegetation. Is there revised, let's see, revised
There,
plan for, maybe I missed it,
I'm-
landscaping to explain how that's going to happen.
that is a good question, because staff, yes, when we took a look at the revised perspective drawing here that shows climbing vines all along this retaining wall, unfortunately, staff does not see any landscape pockets or planters where that landscaping would actually be growing. So perhaps the architect and the applicant can address that issue.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Actually, I have a couple of questions, but I'll ask the architect about the massing between the new and the old, because they look to me the same. But I have a quick question for you.
Yes.
The arborist report talks about a proposed new structure of 1,400 square feet, and this is a 2,900 square
I
feet.
think that must have been a typo on his part,
Typo.
because he actually, he looked at the project and that he might have accidentally made comments regarding another project that he was referring to.
Okay. Yeah, because kind of the site plan kind of matches what.
Yes.
what we see. Okay.
Thank you. All right, let me see what I did with the papers. So does the architect or does the applicant would like to come in? Architect? Okay.
Oh, and forgive me, do you mind before, and I apologize for continuing, just if you would bear with me just a few more moments, please. We received correspondence regarding the project. There were emails from a Mr. Thomas Marsh, who resides at 662 Atkins, which is directly across the street. He had requested a continuance because he is out of the country. That continuance request was to be until, was to have the meeting on on August 24th, when he would be back in the country. That is still something, if the board so chooses, he's requesting a continuance. It's up to the board to grant, whether or not to grant that continuance, so that he would be able to be here for the actual.
This is a neighbor?
This is the neighbor directly across the street. So that, and all of these letters and emails were printed out and put on the dais for your review. So there is a continuance request until August the 24th for the neighbor directly across the street. There was also an email received from a Mr. Mark Walkoff, who resides at 680 Glenmore, which is across the hill looking over to the site. There were concerns stated with regards to the sites and the slope stability. There were obviously concerns because this would be development on a steep hillside lot. So in terms of whether there's any sliding or whatnot, they don't want to see something happen again that happened a number of years back in 2005 when the property is at Gladys, between Gladys and I believe Glenmore. There was slope failure and street closures and home problems, and so they're just very concerned that that would not happen again. There was also an email from Sandra Suarez, who resides at 660 Glen Avenue, and this is a top. So because this is an upsloped site from Atkins, they reside, the street above is Glen Avenue, so they reside atop the project site. And again, there was concerns with whether there's slope failure. Would their property shift downhill in the event of slope failure? There was lastly an email from James Ullman, who also resides on Glen at 670, which I believe is a neighbor to Ms. Sandra Suarez. Again, there's the fear that what happened at Gladys and Glenmore would happen again. So the concerns regarding the lateral and sub-adjacent support systems.
All right.
So
Thank you.
with that said,
Thank you.
I'd like to turn the meeting back over.
All right. Please. If you can state your name.
Name is Bijan Khalili, address 27823 South Monterey Drive, Rancho Palos Verdes. I am architect on this project. The client approached me with a survey and soils report. the previous civil engineer may have included a design in the soils report. That was before we submitted to planning, just to put that to rest.
So you have gone through the SOLS report, so the
Yes.
questions that I'm going to ask you, you are familiar with.
I haven't looked at it for a while, but I
Okay.
will. We'll have to
I'll
research
be
it.
I'll be
Okay.
gentle. With
Okay,
the questions.
fantastic. It is slow. Nevertheless, as pointed out by the city planner, although 1,200 and a half square feet of a lot area, you really are restricted to a very narrow band to put in.
100?
I think it's 12,000.
12,000.
Oh, sorry, 12,450 square foot lot. You're really only portion available is this very narrow band, approximately in the middle of the depth between the code requirements for the retaining walls and the setbacks. 15 feet high and 15 feet slope setback for the house, and the front yard setbacks and the retaining walls. Although architects pretend to be creative geniuses, it really comes down to facts and math. You're really restricted to a very specific footprint on the property, and that combined with the oak trees and access, really the result is a very small area. Nevertheless, I call your attention to site section on sheet A301. And really, the crux of the design starts at a very certain point. If the sill plate of the second floor, right at the end of that dimension, 15-foot dimension, right there is basically the design starts from there and goes to the maximum height of, it's an 8-foot plate plus a little bit of a parapet. So that site section determines almost the entire design. Between the maximum height level and the maximum retaining walls, it not only fixes the design in site plan, but it also fixes it in section. So with those restrictions, trying to manage any type of house, whether you're Frank Lloyd Wright or Frank Gehry or Bijan Clearly, you're really stuck within a very, very specific footprint and a very, very few possibilities. Even within those possibilities, we did explore a number of options. First option was the driveway access at grade, not just the variances that would be required. Really, the owner would be looking at a 23-foot tall retaining wall. Unfortunately, she's not Caltrans, and I don't want to bankrupt my client. So in addition to the variances involved, it's just a matter of practicality and feasibility. Thus, the really only viable option was this long driveway that went up to the kind of the house level, where the only viable footprint could be. And yes, it is. The garage is actually rotated slightly off of the axis of the first floor and second floor. And if you look at section on sheet A303, and you notice I'm mentioning section after section after section, this is really kind of the way you have to design these hillside sites. Just like with the multifamily, if you don't solve the parking, you don't have a project. In these types of hillside sites, you don't solve the sections, you don't have a project. So nevertheless, just to get that backup space in the garage to fit, we had to rotate it slightly off of the axis of the house, and the deck does protrude in front. The second floor deck does protrude in front to kind of screen it, so you're not looking at tailpipes. It is in shadow. But nevertheless, while we're at this point, I urge you to look back at the site plan, A001. Another point, I don't know if architects tell you, but our drawings are not real. They're just fancy, expensive paper. The plans you see, like the elevation, for example, or these illustrations, they are just facade straight-on shots. You have to remember, if you've been to the site, it's a fairly steep street, and the whole house is rotated away from the street. So really your perspective view, if you're standing on Atkins 12 to 15 feet below the house, you're never really going to see this in a frontal view, despite the beautiful renderings. You're really going to see it in a foreshortening or perspective view, if you can see any of it at all, after the landscaping and the retaining walls, et cetera, et cetera. So off of Atkins, it's going to be very difficult to see the overall this supposed horizontality, because really it will disappear into the hillside. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Okay, so I have several questions.
Yes.
But my colleagues, I'll let my colleagues.
I'll defer to you.
Okay.
Sure.
So,
Go for it.
okay. You started your presentation by talking about the corner and the A301 section. And you're telling us that that's basically the starting point.
The second, the sill plate of the second floor, because after you come down off the rear yard setback, you take your 15 feet retaining wall and your 15 foot away from the retaining wall, which is the.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Oh.
I'm trying to
Yes.
go back on what you just said.
Okay.
But you've created the corner that is most visible, a 30-foot tall straight run, a wall. You created almost a 7 or 8 foot retaining wall, and then you created another 13-foot structure, and then a second floor on top of that. I mean, that's what I'm reading. of
Actually,
the
on
section.
301, if you take a quick look, the second floor is pushed back substantially. at that point.
I can read that.
Okay.
Now, why can't you do the same thing and push the middle or the lower section back into the retaining wall or back into the retaining wall and do the same thing you did on your section A303?
A303. So
Why can't you just soften that whole retaining wall and the building, push that building to ground level back as you've done for this one?
Oh, you mean on A303?
Yeah.
Well, at the ground level, we're set between the backup space of 25 feet
I understand.
and the garage of
But
20
what I'm
feet.
trying to say is that
Yes.
what you're saying is that your dictating point for the retaining wall
yes.
is the 15-foot,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's really
But on
the-
your 303, your dictating point is not the retaining wall, is not the 15-foot.
Well, actually, it is again. It still is. That's the same.
Because you push the retaining wall back.
Yeah, in that one little trim. Yes, you're absolutely correct.
So if that's the case, then why can't you just push that whole thing so that you don't have this?
Again, it comes down to feasibility. That is,
all right, that's
if I
fine.
just answer your question really quickly, it's a very small triangle of subterranean space. That little pocket
That
that you're
small
showing.
triangle dictates your entire building height.
No. My point is that if you look at A303, I think you're referring to the
Right.
the cave-like portion.
Right.
That's a very small triangle of the site. Otherwise, it's a flush retaining wall,
Okay.
and there's only so much.
The
that
second
is
question
feasible
is
to
that
do.
going back to your SOS report,
Yes,
if you look at your, do you have the SOS report?
I don't have it in
Okay.
front of me,
So the SOS report cuts a section right through diagonally where the garage is, and it goes across right in the corner. So I'll just show it to you so you can refer it.
Yeah.
Even though the plan, I'm not worried about
yes,
the plan.
yes, I agree.
Cuts through there.
Understand.
So when you look at the section there, which is this whole bottom section is all bedrock. This entire thing based on this is bedrock.
Mm-hmm.
How can you plant all of those trees and plantings and everything in the bedrock? You're
There's-
going to actually drill into the bedrock and then just dig into them?
Actually, a lot of those plants, which are succulents and drought tolerant, really only need a few inches of topsoil. As for the trees, yes, frankly, you do drill into the bedrock. I have worked on hillsides which are entirely bedrock.
So you're going to plant succulents, not actual trees? And
No. It's a mix of both. It's a mix of drought tolerant
So we're
landscaping.
going to be
and-
seeing a 7-foot retaining wall back.
No, and there'll be trees, there'll be succulents, and there will be creeping vines, which will screen the massiveness of the walls.
Okay. That's my question for now. So, anything else?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Can you explain the difference between the massing of the submitted versus the one that we've received today? Because I look at the sections and I see your comments back and forth with staff. You're talking about addressing the hillside guidelines by following the topography. And I see the same exact sections in the same places. I don't see the sections change.
There's actually the section that was cut doesn't show it very well. Really, if you look at the floor plan, it's fairly straightforward. The second floor plan, if you look at sheet A101, on the old versus the new. I don't know which one you're looking at,
Okay.
the new. There was a open to below space on the previous design.
Actually, if you don't mind, I know that you submitted, or actually you have full size,
Yes.
so I can put those up next to the existing
Okay,
ones. So
sure.
perhaps you can, that others can be able to. So these are floor plans.
Yeah, the floor plan might be sufficient to show. Extra pins.
You put this over this particular one, so.
Excellent. So the majority of the second floor is
If you don't mind-
recessed.
If you don't mind
Oh.
coming up and just pointing out. Where we can,
I wish I had my laser pointer.
and actually, we have a pointer.
That's right.
Between the, we have made a number of revisions over the course of the project. Actually, we started in, I believe, October. So it's not just what you see, A and B. This is like maybe P, version P. Nevertheless, between the submitted and the revised, you see that in the previous there was an open to below space, and it's also shown here with a lot of glazing. The second floor is already recessed back and was already recessed back in the majority of the second floor. Because planning's latest comments, we sought to try even harder and revisit it. So we lost the open to below space. If this is the most recent version, we just made it more deck. So the only portion which is stacked is the stair, because it's a stair, and the landing of the stair. So this is recessed, and this is all recessed according to, I guess, the supposed topography. I do have one word of caution, though, about mandating completely stepped designs everywhere. I don't know if you remember in New York in the 50s, they had the whole wedding cake template, and eventually after the first 30, they realized that mandating complete uniformity in the planning guidelines resulted in more of a problem. So nevertheless, in the most recent version, really the only portion that's stacked is here. You can see the garage dashes back, puts the orientation, and everything else is really recessed. This, by the way, is really only about 15 feet, which for a new, close to 3,000 square foot house is absurdly narrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. You've presented a rendering to us that we received today. Usually we get our packets about a week and a half out, that has vegetation, creeping vines on the garage, on the driveway retaining wall going to the home. Where are those creeping vines supposed to be planted?
Didn't have time to add those to the landscape plan, but creeping vines don't take much of a planting area. Virtually, like for the last time I did something, it was narrow, it was 4 or 5 inches. City of LA, for example, the zoning administrator allowed us to conceal a excessively high retaining property line wall and retaining wall with just the 4 or 5 inches we had, and that's sufficient to really allow a creeping vine. So there will be pockets have to be cut out along the edge of the driveway to allow for planters, to allow the creeping vines to creep up.
Okay. And then the tree that you're, number 14, that your arborist is indicating will be removed. Is it being removed for the the entrance steps, or is it being removed because of the building platform?
For the driveway, it's also supposedly not in excessively great health.
It's an A- rated tree.
Yes, and
So I
we
think
are
it could
replacing
help.
it with 4 oak trees
Where are you placing those 4 oak trees?
On the south side, however, from conversations with the neighbor on the north side, we may want to consider relocating them for privacy and shade. If you look to the south side, all the way to the left of the site plan, of the landscape plan, all the way to the, it says 2 new oak trees, and then it's got 2 below it. Oh, 2 and 2, yeah. Upper left corner, right below the upside down 80.
I believe
I'm trying to find where it's.
the oak trees, if you take a look at your arborist report on pages 18 and 19 and 20,
I didn't see where they were adding them.
If you have the site plan, I can.
On the arborist report.
In the arborist
you
report.
see
Sorry.
where the arborist report is recommending adding these because of the bedrock issues, and because obviously there's a bedrock upcropping in this lot. That's why there's not a lot of vegetation over the bedrock. That's why you can build on this lot potentially, because the oak trees are not in the center of it. I'm wondering where they're going to plant these additional ones. You said on my site plan there's.
Yeah, on the site plan, it's in the upper left corner, high on the site, which I believe is filled with a little bit more topsoil.
You mean A and B?
A. Oh.
Is that what the notations are?
A001. Oh, no, I'm not referring to the. Is that the site plan you have?
and you can actually go up.
Mitigation tree map.
Oh.
So here it is. It's basically, it's this figure 2 sub note, A, B, and C, and A are the suggested locations.
Actually, that location A is really kind of where we. But if we can, we may relocate on this side, which the neighbor has raised concerns about privacy. et cetera, et cetera.
But that's where you're removing the tree from.
Yes.
Okay. All right, no further questions right now.
Thank you.
Oh, actually.
Does the applicant
Yes.
would like to speak? Ani Abramian?
Hi, I'm Anya Abramian, and hopefully the future owner of this property. And I just want to give some history about this project. When we started it, obviously it looked like a completely challenging lot with basically it has a hump in the front, and then it kind of slopes not that high. And we figured there are properties next to it, and so we should be able to build something on it. So we started thinking about how we can do the garage, and we worked with Mr. Bijan throughout the whole project. And the driveway was the most challenging one. And of course, the linear way of this house it is, we have to obviously only use the length of it because we can't go too far deep in. As far as the oak trees, we would like to preserve all of them. However, number 14 had to be, because of the constructions and the turnaround of the driveway. And also, we noticed the half of the roots are gone because of the next door neighbors. We couldn't preserve it, and we talked to Jeremy about it, and he suggested that we can plant 4 other trees next to the other oaks. So we'll be planting 4 more. And any questions? Or?
I have one question, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow. You opened your comments by saying you'll hopefully be the future owner of this property.
Yes.
And I just did notice that there was another owner listed on the property profile. So are you not the owner?
As of current, I'm in escrow. I have been in escrow with the condition that Glendale City will give the approval to build a house on this property. So
that's
9 months of escrow.
a smart way to do it, I guess. Thank you very much for that clarification. And then I had one other question, but I think I'll remembering.
All right.
So we'll leave that for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vahe der Gulastian?
Hello.
And I'm sorry, your name for the record, please.
Vahe der Kalusian.
Thank you.
I'd like to start by saying I have a few documents here. If I can hand them off to somebody, is that?
Please. And do you have copies for everyone, or would you like me to make copies?
No, if you can. I just have one copy.
You only have one copy?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's basically a petition that we've started in the neighborhood on change.org. And the first page there just has a description of the petition. And there's a couple other documents. One of them are the signatures of the Glenmore Canyon neighbors. There's about 16 signatures. And there's another document with different comments from those neighbors that voice their concerns on the proposed construction site. In addition to that, my specific concerns I'd like to voice today to the board. I live on Atkins Drive. I live diagonally from the proposed construction site. You can actually see my house on this map right here. If you don't mind, I can walk over and
Sure.
point it out. This is my home right here.
But you need to speak into mic, so just point it out and you can come back.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So that is my home, which is diagonally from the hillside of the proposed site. After talking to a lot of the neighbors, their major concerns was safety. I'm not a civil engineer or a soils engineer, so I leave that up to the city of Glendale to approve. But my main concerns today is just the inconvenience that this construction would cause me and my family personally, as well as all the other neighbors in the neighborhood, specifically on Atkins Drive. If you're familiar with the street, it's a one-way street. It's a very narrow street. And this vacant lot sits towards the end of this one-way street. So, number one, my concern is the traffic that it would cause, trying to leave the Atkins Drive. It is, like I said, a one-way street, so there is only one exit, and you would have to pass this house, this lot to exit. So when construction starts, you have all these tractors and other construction vehicles and equipment. I'm concerned about the delays it would cause for people to exit the street. And because it's very narrow, I don't see how practical it is to park these vehicles there or have other construction material out on the site as construction progresses over the months. My next and biggest concern is the construction noises and inconvenience that would cause. I'm familiar with the Glendale Municipal Code that states Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. is the allowable time for construction. I don't know if this is the correct forum to request this or to voice
I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap up.
Thank you, displeasure about this, but I would request that there'd be, if this does get approved, that there'd be no construction on Saturdays, as this is time when people are usually home away from work. Me and my wife, we have a Monday through Friday job, as I think a lot of people around the neighborhood do. Kids are home from school. I think it's unfair and irresponsible to expect the neighbors around this proposed site to endure the months, possibly year of construction. 7 a.m. on Saturday mornings when people are home away from work. Those are my biggest concerns, and I do speak for all the neighbors on Atkins Drive and in our neighborhood.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Bloomsman?
Good evening. Alan Bloomsma. I also have some pages I can hand out.
Yes, thank you.
So I am a neighbor to this property that's being proposed, and I oppose the proposed development. I'm going to start with the summary of what I'd like, and then I'll go into the details of why I'm requesting these items. So first item, like was mentioned earlier, a lot of concerns on the stability. So would like more extensive geotechnical evaluation. We'd also like to make sure that they have insurance to cover any damages to the adjacent properties. We shouldn't be expected to carry the burden of their effort. Next item, deny the plan to remove the protected coast oak tree, it's tree number 14, and also tree number 13. We'll get into why a little bit. Deny a plan for the garage at the top of the hill. Require detailed drainage plan. Require the house to be redesigned to complement the neighborhood look and feel. Require more details on the construction activities and impose some limitations. Construction duration, timing, traffic disruption, noise, and require some safety barriers to protect fall hazards. So going into more detail for number one, slope stability. Again, I'm not an expert. Was it extensive enough? What other testing should be done? What other testing could be done? Probably should have some independent studies. Is the consultant, I don't know how it works, but are they guaranteeing that their work is up to par? As was mentioned earlier, we had one house that failed, ended up with 3 vacant houses now. They're still sitting there. No one's living in them. And there should be some insurance to cover us. Going on to the next one, removal of the coast live oak tree, number 14. As you know, it's a protected tree. That tree shares the property line with us, so it's half on each property line, and we would like to keep the tree. Provide stability to the ground, it provides shade, and in our opinion, there's enough space that they don't need to come over that far. Let's see, tree 13. That one's fully on our property, and we'd like to keep it. So there are a number of issues with the location of the garage. And as mentioned earlier, it's been a big challenge for them. You can see, I put a little sketch together of some of the issues. So first item, with the house, it's
You need
the garage
to wrap up, so
Okay.
your time is up. You need to wrap up.
Oh, sorry, didn't realize. So, right, turning radius, they can't get out of the driveway. It's, there's no way to make that turn, so it's impossible to get a car into the garage and out. And,
Okay.
all right, the rest you have myself.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
I will allow architect or the owner applicant to rebuttal.
Are there any other?
There's no
individual-
more cards.
Are there any other individuals who would like to speak? No? Okay.
No.
Sorry,
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure because
So
You were
whoever would like to.
And this would be a 2-minute rebuttal, so.
Okay. As far as the oak tree goes, we were not going to cut it out because of any of our driveway was going to be hitting it. It's just that you have to be 20 feet away from the trunk of the tree. And because of that, the roots might get impacted with the grading, and that's why we're proposing it to remove it and plant 4 other trees where the other oak trees are much more, obviously they are in a good shape, and definitely growing a lot bigger on this side as opposed to in the corner here. And I'm not sure what has happened to the other house where they're mentioning that has been a soil failure. This one is sitting at an upslope, therefore it's much more stable than the downslope one. And as you can see, it's going to be sitting on a bedrock. And we're going to have retaining walls, which is going to be caisson retaining walls on the back. And with a 2 feet freeboard to prevent any of the soil coming into the house. That's the back retaining wall, 15 feet. And the soil engineer suggested that we keep 2 feet of freeboard to prevent any of the soil coming into the house in case there's going to be a rain or for any reason. And without this driveway, I don't think it's possible for us to do any garage unless, as you can see, even we drafted one that by having 3 level, I am running out of time. By having
you need
3,
to wrap up. So.
yes. So by having 3 level, that was not possible. So we had to propose this type of driveway in order to have a garage.
Okay. Thank you. Public session is closed. We're going to try to, I just want to let the public know that we're going to try to go over our comments, but we have a drop deadline time of 7 o'clock. If it comes to that point, we may continue it for the next hearing. So, Mr. Georgian.
Thank you. I don't know where to start because there's a lot of issues with this project in my mind. I think it's commendable that a family is trying to look at this lot as a potential location for their home. And the fact is that over time, building safety codes and prescriptions that are made to safeguard the public change. And there's a reference made to Frank Lloyd Wright that has, I think, 2 homes, the Canyon, Chevy Chase Canyon, or maybe it's just the one, that probably might not be able to be built today if they had the same code restrictions that we have, right? There are ways to address the design here and not have the impact that this project has. One way is to apply for a variance. It's a lengthy process. There's costs associated to it, but it would affect design, I think, in a positive way, potentially. Additionally, I don't like to see, as a design board member, last-minute revisions that are disingenuous as to what will actually be on site. I take issue with that. Okay? And what I mean by that is the greenery that is being shown on the massive front perspective here. There is hanging vines that are supposed to sprout out from locations that are yet to be determined, that shade or block off a very massive concrete, non-conforming to the design element. These things need to be thought through. I have hanging vines that I've been trying for 6 years now to get to be as lush as they once were over a wood fence, now that we have a concrete block fence, and I can't get that. And they're on soil, regular soil. They have all the dirt they need. Here we have bedrock. These are things that need to be thought through. I don't see the need to cut down the oak tree. The arborist report indicates that it's likely not to survive. I don't think we should actively go cutting down oak trees that might survive, might not survive. It's a healthy tree. It should be, an attempt should be made to preserve it. There's also now issues from the neighbor indicating that it might not be on the property line. It might be on their side of the property, or it might be a shared tree, right? Tree 13 I can't comment on because it's not a protected tree and is outside the purview of what we have for Design Review Board in reference to protected tree species. But if it's a property line issue, that needs, I think, to be clarified, which will be done down the road. But since this applicant is looking to purchase this property, I wouldn't want to comment on that. You might want to get a survey done of where the lot line is and where these trees are. You don't want to be buying yourself into litigation as to who cut down my tree, because that's going to be an issue. If, in fact, the tree is actually not on your property, because it's indicating by Mr., and I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Bozeman, that he's the owner of 677 Atkins Drive, and that both those trees are either shared trees on the property line or wholly on his property. I also disagree with the architect's comments that if you're standing on Atkins, that this house is not visible or visible at a very small angle. I think this is a pretty massive building. I understand why it's massive and very linear, because that's how you can build a livable size home. But I think that it hasn't been thought through as far as how to break up that linearity. The provisions that address the staff comments are breaking it up but hiding it at the same time, right? Behind this, I think, the staircase piece. So I think we have a lot more that we need to see in order to make an educated decision as to whether to approve or this project or not. And what I have in front of me, I don't see that. I don't see enough information. The soils report is great. I'm glad that we have a full soils report, but it's very clear that it was not done and engineered with this exact project in mind. It was designed with a similar size project in mind. The calculations that normally we see for cut and fill are absent. It just tells us it's 1,700 square feet. Now, I am not, as the members of staff know, and maybe some of the people in the public know, I'm not an architect. I'm an attorney, and so I rely on seeing the calculations. I did not see them in the geotech. I did not see them on the plans. I just saw numbers called out. And I don't know if those numbers are accurate based on just the sheer size of the cut. And I'll stop there and let my colleagues comment further.
I think I'll add my voice to Mr. Charshin about some of the issues that I have with the project. But I'd like to address a couple of the issues that the gentleman and the other neighbor had brought up in terms of stability, and if the technical report is sufficient. It's sufficient, and this is bedrock, so you're not going to have an issue like down the street or whatever. So that's not an issue. And in terms of insurances, no general contractor can get the project and start working on it. This will all happen when they pull their permits. They need that. They need that to be in place. So that's not going to be an issue either. And working hours are determined by the Glendale Building Department, so that's not an issue either. I just want you guys to get that peace of mind. In terms of design, and I actually like the design in terms of material and how the contemporary look. I think it fits well. I think they're using nice material. I like the linear design, but there are some major issues that I see, and I think most of it happens with the scale that happens with the mass in the front. I mean, when you look at it, it looks like a 3-story home, not a 2-story, because this retaining walls here in the front. I mean, look at the proportion. This is a story, and this is maybe a little bigger than a story. And just by covering it with some vine, that's not going to work, probably not a solution. Other issues I have with the project, I think most of it has to do with the size of the house. Not to say that 3,000 square feet is a mansion or is big or anything, but I think the architect brought up that point. You just don't have much of a buildable area. You have 63% of slope. You have an area that's filled with oak trees. You're left with a very narrow strip of land, and now you're trying to fit 3,000 square feet on it. Yeah, the FAR works well when you look at 12,000 square feet, but you're not building on 12,000 square feet. If you look at slope analysis, and if you do it like how they do it in LA, you probably will be limited to 1,500 square feet or 2,000 square feet. So I think one way to address this is maybe just to reduce some of the square footage and just try to, I understand you're trying to break the mass on the second floor by pushing that central part in, but when you have a horizontal roof line, that's not helping you, because when we look at it, we look at and we see like a big block, like once you start breaking that roof line and you get away a little bit from the horizontality, I think that's going to help you. And we're not saying wedding cake, and I understand what you're saying. We're not telling you do 10 steps here. But if there was a step here and you have this piece, and now this is a mass, and now this is another mass, that's going to help you. That's going to help reduce that mass. In terms of the driveway, I see this is like one of the toughest situations that I see. Like they're saying you can't, the variance, you need to go through the variance. City staff mentioning humongous retaining wall in the front if you go that route. So I don't know what's the best solution for that. I can see the hardship. But in terms of what I see today, I think you need. I think the design is nice, the contemporary look is nice, the material is nice. I think you just need to work on your massing, just to break it up a little bit to make it fit a little better, and maybe you lose some square feet here and there. I think this is on my comments.
Okay, thank you. So just a quick note. Public brought up some comments regarding the legality of the project. It's a legal street and construction and issues. Unfortunately, we're only here to deal with the design of the project. We have a legal street, we have a legal lot, and this project is going through the correct channels. So we're here to review the design. So unfortunately, we cannot deny the project because of some of the conditions that are there, which are essentially legal, that they have all the right to do. So what we have in front of us is a project that we have to review the design. Talking about the design, first of all, I'm kind of glad that I saw the rendition that it was brought in, the second rendition, because obviously staff had a good point, and they were trying to address some of the conditions and some of the issues that they saw. It's kind of disappointing to get to this point at this time that you had, and I'm talking about the applicant, that seems like you didn't come to any resolution for them to recommend a return for redesign. But obviously, within a week or so, whatever, whenever you got the conditions, this was resolved. So obviously, the direction is going in the correct direction, the right direction. We always are faced with conditions such as this when a project is being proposed in a hillside on a 60% slope, that the development is proposing a flat lot, kind of a condition, creating the flat lot condition. Obviously, you're not doing that. You're creating a flat at the entry, and then you're stepping that up with the retaining wall in the back. But that's not apparent as far as the front, as far as the street side is concerned. There's a lot of materials, a lot of different elements that are happening there. Where it's taken, the design has taken on the second floor, I think it's in the right direction. I think it's in the right direction in a sense that now by removing that volume, what you've done is you've accentuated and you've created an additional setback on the second floor, which meets the hillside guidelines. My concern is that because you have to create this retaining wall and the 7-foot retaining wall, especially at the corner of the building, that it's essentially you're creating a 30-foot wall, and you're standing there, and you're standing on the street side, which is actually you're a little bit lower because of the slope of the street. You're going to see a much bigger mass there, in a sense. I think there's opportunities there to fix that problem, which I think it's a very simple solution, and you've addressed that in your section, as I mentioned, on your A303. I think a step back on the retaining wall on the bedrooms and the bathroom, pushing that back, allowing a softer stepping from the driveway to the building site. I think that will allow you to create some planting area. And then also creating the solid wall on the I got to get my bearings right. On the south face, you have the opportunity to wrap the materials, and rather than create a solid wall, and I'll be a little bit more clear, addressing this solid wall here by eliminating this or creating a different material or something that wraps around and softens that corner itself. This definitely can be worked on. And I have the sketch, I can put it up. But the idea is that what it has been proposed in this section, how this foundation or the retaining wall has been pushed in, they can do the same thing here, pull this building back, and then step this foundation and create a stepping planting area along the driveway there. You also have opportunity to push the retaining walls that are holding the deck in and suspending the deck out. So therefore the retaining wall height is reduced. You have floating kind of a deck. There's a lot of design elements there that will soften this project rather than creating these sheer walls that are like a 7-foot wall here, 7-foot wall there. And just coming here simply saying that this is the only solution. There's definitely hundreds of different types of solutions to literally create a much better design. Now, stacking a building on top of these retaining walls that are obviously, that's all we're going to see for, I would say, at least, and I'll be very generous, at least a year until these grow. We need to figure out a way to minimize the impact of this building, assuming that these plantings are not going to grow. So the challenge is to how do we do this? Creating a 13-foot floor-to-floor height is a big number. It's a big number in a very small volume building. What it'll do is, it gives us an opportunity for us to reduce the height at certain parts of this building and be able to lower possibly right over the garage area because of the stepping, because of your section that you've shown to us. Where is that section?
Bottom right corner.
I think it's right here. So based on this section, how you've shown this, you have an upper building and then it's sloping down. Obviously, this portion has already been addressed. Street side, that as the hill is going up, you're stepping back, which is fine. But as it was brought up by staff, you have in a higher building, you have a flat and you have a lower, but then you created this flat, more of a commercial look rather than a softer residential scale look building. So I think that the opportunities there is that to take advantage of this 13-foot ceiling and essentially lower this section. So you're actually stepping this building down as this hill is stepping away from the center. Now, it's really difficult to read the plans. So if this thing comes back, I want a very clear set of plans that shows the ground level overlaid on top of the site plan. Because right now, I'm looking at these hatchings. The only thing that I have is a site plan with some hatching diagrams that I have to kind of visualize how this thing is being impacted. The only other plan that I have that shows the ground level is the first floor plan without any reference to any adjacent driveways, any walls, any retaining walls, any steps, anything that is happening at that level. So it's a very difficult set of plans. But I still want to understand those two trees that are being removed along the north property line. It's not being represented on this plan, on the site plan. So I need to see where those trees are and how they're being impacted so that I can understand it. It is necessary. I understand the development needs to happen. If it's going to get impacted, we need to remove it. But why is it happening? Is there a way that we can alter the design to get you what you want, at the same time maintain the trees? If it's not necessary, let's not do it. So there's a lot of unknowns in this thing, and there's a lot of ways that it can be improved. So having said all of this, I want to go over the conditions that staff has put in front of us, and if we have time, but I think we're not going to have time, so we may.
Wonder you can give me a ride.
If we want to quickly do this?
$5?
Yeah.
Yeah, we go 10 minutes over.
10 minutes over. Okay. We can do that.
I'll try to be quick then.
So let's go ahead and go through this really quick, and if we can wrap this up.
What I'm hearing, Chairman Malikian, the first one, let me go back to the staff's conditions that were recommended in the staff report. Decrease the overall size and span width of the residence while essentially maintaining the proposed architectural design and fenestration configuration along the front facade. I am not hearing support of that condition, because I think we're addressing the mass and scale more within the other conditions that are going to be modified. Is that correct? So eliminate number one?
No.
Keep number one?
Yeah.
You still would like to sort of shrink the width? Okay.
I mean,
And
the
decrease the overall
width
size?
is width. It can be. The width is relative to what they're proposing to do. You know, right now they've created all these little masses that are there. So to me, if this is it creates this elongated space, possibly even softening this up, lowering this, and it will solve that problem. But if they see that they need to remove, I mean, I don't want it to be a condition in a sense that to reduce the width,
Right.
because I think what it's going to do is if you reduce the width, it's going to increase it's going to create this square box.
Possibly by some of the stepping that you talked about.
Like
Yeah, so span and width is not that big of an issue, but yet if they want to reduce it, so maybe that can be a consideration
Okay,
rather than a condition.
Okay, the second one is to introduce and this is the one that I'm going to sort of tailor, introduce a change in parapet level height and floor plates to soften the horizontality of the roof line and to better express the topography of the site within the project parallel to the street.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay. Third was actually done in this.
Yes.
The third one was to offset the second floor.
So we can remove that.
Okay. The fourth was to redesign the vertically oriented retaining walls at the front, either a horizontal poured concrete finish or burnished block, which was done. Okay. The fifth was to revise the landscape plan to add additional landscaping, trees, taller shrubs, and climbing vines at the bottom of the front retaining walls, as well as trailing vines above the rear retaining walls. I would like to leave that in there just to make sure that it's working, because the revised landscape plan staff did not really have a chance to address it and in regards to the actual perspective drawing, which we know that is very different, okay? 6 would be to clarify the proposed grass area at the rear patio in relation to the concrete foundation system.
Grass areas, but,
It's proposed on the landscape plan, and then on, and actually that's going
Grass
to be
on top
changed.
of concrete.
Yeah, so we'll leave that in there. The additional comments that I heard were to separate the driveway retaining wall from the first floor bedroom bath,
I'll
then-
just put this.
to eliminate the
Just
flat
for-
wall.
I don't want them to, this is just my kind of copying, pushing this back, creating this stuff.
to creating a step, and then to create to eliminate the flat wall and allow the introduction of a landscape planter for trailing vines, and to step. So am I hearing to actually step the driveway retaining walls? And I'm going to look to Chris because perhaps she can better address the condition.
They have a 9-foot wide driveway with almost no turning area. So I'm not sure how they're going to add additional pocket, having the building sitting right on that retaining wall of the driveway. So the only way they can do that is push the building back and be able to create some sort of a landscape pocket there
And-
to be able to soften that.
And that might be exactly what happens once they get to the permitting process, is that they're not going to maybe able to get the radiuses on that.
Well,
What
we
if
can.
that was
Without
the
pushing it
building
back.
At the first floor to offset retaining wall from the first floor wall and add planters as opposed to stacking.
That's a much clearer explanation.
Yes.
Yes. Perfect.
I have 15-foot floor-to-floor height is excessive. If going across consistently, reduce in areas to create stepping, such as over the garage area. The plans should show the drawings should have more clarity and accuracy, and should show, in particular, the ground floor overlaid on the site plan. The trees need to be properly shown on the site plan, and it is definitely preferred to not remove the 2 trees. Second floor design is going in the right direction through the offset that you added, but the left-hand corner feels like 3 stories, and changing the materials at the corner, stepping back the retaining wall, or eliminating material or change of material to soften the corner, but to look at that in particular. That's what I have on that page, and those were Board Member Malikian's. Board Member Benlian felt that the size of the house should be reduced to more appropriately align.
Can be a
No.
But that's with the
Okay.
number 1 with the consideration.
Okay.
Okay, I have a couple.
Basically.
Since this might be going a certain direction. On the materials board, you have a building slide that appears to be wood or some sort of composite material. So the condition I would like to add is if the material is deemed to not be appropriate by from a fire safety perspective, that the replacement material be of the same color and style. Is that okay?
Anything else from the board?
Are we returning it?
I mean, my feeling was that we want to see what this looked like, but
Make the motion.
motion for redesign based on the conditions. Second.
I have a motion made by Board Member Charchian, a second by Board Member Benlian. In terms of a roll call, Board Member Benlian?
Yes.
Board Member Charchian?
Yes.
Chairman Malikian?
Yes.
The motion passes 3-0.
Okay.
Okay, we have two sets of minutes left on tonight's agenda.
And I think
One
we're
would
gonna
be
need to-
June 8th, board members Benlian, Charchian, and Malikian were present, so
June
you
8th.
three.
Motion to approve the minutes from June 8th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. And then we have the minutes from June 22nd, 2017. Board members Benlian, Charchian, Malikian, and Simonian. All four of you were present, so.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
I have a motion by board member Benlian, seconded by board member Charchian. All in favor to approve the minutes from June 22nd? Motion passes 3-0. There are no other items on tonight's agenda, so is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.